Hi, and welcome back to Glassbox, writing automated RSpec tests. Today we're going to pick up from where we left off, and as promised, write a WebDriver RSpec test. So today we will look at effectively how to write a WebDriver RSpec test and what we would need to do to further set up our environment to cater for WebDriver tests. So the first thing we need to do is actually install Selenium-Webdriver for Ruby, and the way to do that is just open up your command console window or click on the Windows icon and just press CMD and enter, and really quickly just do a gem -v. This tells us that gem is still installed. Well, there isn't any reason you shouldn't be, and then just do a gem space install space Selenium WebDriver and hit enter. Now this could take some time depending on your network. Shouldn't be too bad. And there you go. So once you get control back over your cursor, just do a quick gem list, and this will list all the gems you currently have installed locally to your machine. And just make sure you've got Selenium WebDriver installed. This is just effectively a double check on your half to make sure that gem did in fact install Selenium WebDriver. And that's Selenium WebDriver installed. So again, like I said in a previous video, one of the beauties of gem is it allows you to install various gems without having to go and fish for it all over the web. If there's other things interested in, all you have to do is find out what the relevant name is and just download it via gem install. Right, so back to our test. So we're just going to dive straight in. We're going to go new RSpec test template. We're going to call the example WebDriver test. My behavior is going to be let's say my zoo site, and do something will be open browser and click on contact. So I'll explain what this zoo site and open browser and click on contact is. Again, let's just get rid of this. So really quickly, let's write out what we're trying to do. So the first thing we want to do is create a WebDriver driver. Then we would like to navigate to some website. In this case, this will be our zoo site, and I'll show you the site in a second. Then we want to click on contact link. Then we want to print out the page title, and finally close the browser. So that's what we want to try and achieve. So let me mimic this in an actual browser. And I'll navigate to the zoo site. So I've been testing against this website. This is my own website which I've built. It's a really rudimentary website. It's not supposed to be fancy or high tech. It's just supposed to allow me to automate on it using various different technologies. So in this case, what I want to do is basically navigate to this site, then click on contact, then print out this title, and then close the browser. That's all I want to do. So the first thing to do is actually find out how to create an instance of WebDriver. So before we do that, we actually need to import in WebDriver, and the way we do that is say require, and because we've installed Selenium WebDriver now, it's just a case of saying Selenium WebDriver. This will now import in the necessary libraries for Selenium WebDriver, which we can then use in our RSpec test. So to actually run the driver, what we're going to do is just define a driver. So we're just going to say driver, and we're going to say driver is equal to Selenium WebDriver dot for, and in here we can identify the browser we want to use. So we can say : Firefox. So this is the syntax that's needed to basically tell RSpec that we want to use the Selenium-Webdriver library and we want to run it against a Firefox browser. So this effectively will open up a new Firefox browser. So really quickly, before we go anywhere else, let's quickly run this test and see if it just opens a browser. That's all we're interested in at the moment. It's also to test that our require worked. So right click, run. So if you notice this green bar here, that means our test is finished. So it did definitely open a browser, and it effectively closed without any failures. So that's a really good sign. That means that our install for Selenium WebDriver worked, our require worked, and the fact that we wanted to open up a Firefox browser worked. So that's actually a very good sign that so far everything is effectively a green light. So the next thing we want to do is actually navigate to some site. Well, we said we would like to navigate to this zoo site. So I'm just going to copy this URL. And to actually navigate, all you do is we say driver dot navigate dot to, and in here we provide the URL we want to navigate to, and it's as easy as that. So this will now navigate to this particular address. The next thing we want to do is we want to click on contact link. So let's have a look at what the underlying HTML code of this contact link is and see what we can use. Right, so this particular link has an ID of contact_link, and it's also got a name of nav_contact. So WebDriver provides what are known as locators, and we can use any one of these. So for the moment, I think we will go with the ID. So let me just copy this. Oops, I've lost it. Go back to the test. And what we're going to say is we're going to say driver dot find element, and in here we're going to say we want to look by ID, and the value we're looking for is contact link. So this method here will find an element assuming it exists and then return it, and then on this method we can act on it further. So we can use the dot after this as well, and we can do a click. So what this should do now is this should effectively search for an element on the page which has an attribute ID with a value of contact_link, and then click on it. So the next thing we want to do is effectively print out the title of that page. So we know how to print stuff. It's just a puts, and we'll get driver dot title, and this will return us the title of the page. The final thing we want to do is close. So you may have guessed by how easy it is to use WebDriver's API for RSpec. It's pretty much driver and then a dot or a period or a full stop, whatever you want to call it, and you get a list of APIs. So justifying why I like using RubyMine. RubyMine is really good at kind of providing this kind of stuff. Yes, Eclipse and NetBeans do it also, but because RubyMine is catered for Ruby and various other gems that come with Ruby, it's just, I personally just find it a lot more easier to use. So anyway, I'm going to say driver dot and I will see if there's a quit method. There we go, there is. This will effectively quit the driver, or in other words, close the browser. So let's give this a go. Right click, run, and let's see what happens. Perfect. So we saw it open the browser, we saw it click on the contact link, it's printed out the contact link, and then it's quit the driver. So in this test we did well, actually in this video we did two different things. The first thing we did was we installed gem, the Selenium-Webdriver gem. If this was any other language, we'd have to go and fish for WebDriver, and we'd need to download maybe some jar for it. Similarly, if we had something like Maven or some other build tool like Ant or even Gradle, all we do is just add in a dependency. Ruby's take is to just install it via gem, and that downloads the necessary libraries for you. Then in your test, all you do is require, and then inside your test, if you want to use it, all you do is declare what browser you want to use it in and save this instance in driver. And then using the driver, because it's captured the browser as well as the fact that we're running a WebDriver test, you are able to access all the APIs and string them together to perform your action. So in this case, all we do is we'll navigate it to a site, and then what we do is we just clicked on the contact link by getting the ID, and then we printed out the driver. So this is now blending two different APIs, one which is provided by Ruby in essence, and the other which is provided by WebDriver in essence, in which it just returns a string, and then we quit the driver. So looking at this, it should be fairly straightforward on how easy it can be to write all of these tests. A particular feature that I didn't mention before in my previous video was when it comes to test management. Naturally, I'm a really big fan for keeping tests very specific to what they should do. So this test is should open a browser and click on a contact, which means this test, if someone were to just read the description of this test, has absolutely nothing to do with creating an instance of driver. It's got nothing to do with navigating to a site. All it cares about is having an open browser and then clicking on the link. So we can effectively move this stuff outside of this test method, but the question is, where do we move it? Well, RSpec provides us, similar to other frameworks like JUnit, before and after methods. So we can do something like this, a before, and here we can define a parameter of what type of before this is. So we can say each, or we can say all. I'll explain the difference between the two in a bit. So let's say each, and in here we can now move this code and put it in here. What this will do now is this will now open an instance of Firefox, navigate to this site, and then perform our test. And similarly, we can have an after as well. So we can say after, let's say each again, and what we actually need to do is, like I said, every method ends with a do and an end. So I'm just going to say a do and an end. And if we have a look at this, if you just have a look at this particular test, can you see anything in this test which is a good candidate to happen in your after method as opposed to inside the test? Well, to me, this quit method looks like a perfect candidate to be moved outside of your test because it's got nothing to do with your test. So just move this out here. So to those who aren't familiar with a before method and an after method, what the before and after method basically do is they run in a particular order in relation to your test. So what the before method does is it basically runs before your test runs, and the after method runs after your test runs. So in essence, because coincidentally they just happen to be in order, what will happen is this will run first, followed by a test, followed by the after method, and what will happen is it will generate the browser window, it'll do our test, and then it'll close the browser window. So before we run this, there's also another problem. If you have a look, this driver instance is used within this method, but then the instance is lost because it's not declared anywhere else. If you're familiar with the scope of variables, when a variable is declared inside a method, scope is also lost inside the method when the method ends. But Ruby provides us with a really neat way of basically telling it that this method should be available on a much wider scope. So if we do this, if we just put the @ sign in, that basically means that this variable is now available to this entire class. So now if we run the test, we should still get the same behavior, but now we've effectively segregated the test out. Perfect. So it's done exactly what we were hoping for. It ran the before method first, and then it performed our test, and then it closed the browser. So an advantage to taking this approach where we have a before and after is we can now add in multiple tests. So let's just say we want to add in another test here. And let's say in this instance we're not going to click on contact, we're going to click on about. I'm assuming that the about link ID is probably about underscore link, similar to the contact. So I'm just going to change this to about. So now if we run this test, what will happen is we have said that this before method annotated as an each before method. This is really important to note. This before method is at the moment annotated as an each before method, and this after is also annotated as an each after method. This before method will run before each of your tests, not before all tests. So in effect what will happen is this before method will run, and then this test will run, and then this after method will run, and then when it comes to the next test, this before will run again, because this is identified as an each method. So another way to look at it is this before method will run as many times as needed for the number of tests you have in your test class. So let's run this. Oops, I should have run the class instead. Sorry. So let's run this. What I did was I actually clicked run inside the test. So what Ruby did was it basically thought I was just running this test. What I wanted to do is run this entire test class. So just click outside of an init method and run. And there you go. So you run both tests, and the beauty of having this before each and after each was that when we wrote this new test, or we copy pasted this new test, we only had to change a few things, but we didn't have to care about reinitializing the driver or closing the driver. It's kind of handled for us. So as promised, I did say there was another version of this before, and it's called the all before. 10 points to anyone who can guess what this actually does. Well, what it does is, when we say before all, as opposed to the before each, which run each time a new test is about to run, before all or after all run only once in a class. So this will run only the one time, and this will run only the one time. So what I'm expecting to happen is it will run this before all. It will most likely run one or the other test. Doesn't really matter which order it picks, but let's just assume it runs this test. It won't call this because this will run after every test does run, because it only runs once. It will come here and it will click on the about, and the about link is still visible on the contact page, so it won't fail, and then it will close the browser. So as opposed to closing a browser, opening a new one, it'll keep the same one open and then close at the very end. So let's test that. And there you go. So it still ran two examples, and both of them passed without any issues. We still have the necessary outputs as well. But because of the nature of this before and after all version, and before and after each version, your test could be very different. So I'll just quickly explain a couple of good candidates. Before all can be used where you only want to run something just the one time, whereas a before each should be facilitating situations where you want to run something multiple times. So this, for instance, this is a better idea to have this run in a before each, because your starting points for your test might not all be the same. You might need to be in different places for your test, navigating to different pages where certain things might not be available from one and other tests. So before each is a good place to initialize your driver, for instance. And the same thing with your after each. Close that instance of the browser. Before all and after all methods could facilitate something like opening a connection to a database or to a server where you only want to retain a connection to an external source and only have it connected just once for resource reasons, for processing reasons, and close it only once again at the very end of your test. So in this video we learnt how to instantiate a driver and navigate to a site and then find something by ID and then get title and close it. We then went in a little bit more deeper into managing this test in a much more meaningful pattern, as opposed to just tuner packing everything into the same test, giving out us a little bit more management complexity and a little bit more freedom to write our tests more freely, as opposed to being constructed and constricted to using the same code. We've also found a really good way to reduce code duplication as well. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my videos and find they bring you some new knowledge or insight into writing WebDriver RSpec tests, then please subscribe and rate. If you have any questions or video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.